From American Falls to Malad, we've got the biggest stories in District 5 covered. This is the Southeast Idaho Prepcast with Jordan Kaye.
That's right. Welcome into another edition of the Southeast Idaho Prepcast on IdahoSports.com, breaking down all of the biggest stories in District 5, week in, week out. Brandon Baney joined by, from the Idaho State Journal, Jordan Kaye. Jordan, how are you?
Pretty good. Enjoying the, cooler weather in Pocatello finally.
Yeah, so we've still been at our house at night. We've been keeping the thermostat cooler because it's been hot. But for the first time, like I got up today and the house still isn't like gone above 60. So we might have to adjust the thermostat today.
Yeah,
how cold
a little bit. Holy cow.
Yeah. So the Southeast Idaho Prepcast is brought to you by Pure Adrenaline Motorsports, your source for pulse-pounding adrenaline sports apparel and accessories that ensure you have what you need to unleash the beast. And you can check them out online as well. That's Pure Adrenaline Motorsports. So here we are. We've hit the big time, Jordan. We got a sponsor.
Incredible. Wow, I love that.
It's all because of you. You've done 95% of the work, I feel like.
I don't set this up, though, so jump on.
Right. Well, let's dive into what happened last week in the football landscape for District 5. You were at Holt Arena Friday night to watch Highland take on Madison. You wrote a great article about the game afterwards, and that's you can check that out online at IdahoStateJournal.com. 42-16.
Yeah.
And Madison came in with a nice record of 3-1, but I think Highland kind of showed that Madison still has a ways to go to compete in the upper echelon of the conference.
Sure. And me and you were pretty, we weren't exactly bullish on that 3-1 record for Madison. They hadn't played many great teams, but I was still expecting a good game. It's the start of conference play. Highland had, just played a really high energy game against Pocatello. The last two games were against 4A opponents. They hadn't faced a 5A team in 3 weeks. So I was like, okay, maybe this could be close. And man, was it not. Highland's defense just absolutely swarmed Madison in every facet of the game. Front seven got more pressure. And then you see a back end led by Adam Jones. It was just all over the Madison receivers all night. And then I think this was the best game we had seen from Highland quarterback Jack Whitmer. He completed 17 and 19 passes, had 200 something yards, a couple touchdowns. I mean, he was just fantastic. Ran for another 100. I thought this was his best game all year. And early in the season, a lot of people were like, "Wow, is he accurate enough to really lead this Highland offense?" And the last two games, I mean, he's been like over 75%, over 80%. It's like, holy cow, their execution has been fantastic. And so they're really hitting on all cylinders right now. They go play Thunder Ridge this week. A couple weeks, they've got that big matchup against Rigby. And right now, Highland's rolling.
Yeah, Highland is, as I was looking at the schedules, I think Highland is the only team that's going to play 9 games in the regular season this year. They had that week 0 game against Rocky Mountain, and all the other teams that played in week 0 have a bye week built in somewhere. But for Highland, they're going to be the only team, no buys or anything like that. Maybe they'll get a bye if they win the conference, though, first round of the playoffs.
Sure. That's a lot. I don't know how that schedule worked out.
For sure. Can we talk about Jack Whitmer for a second? I know you've spoken about this before, but it's worth reiterating. Last year as a junior, he was QB1 when the season started for Highland and went through a pretty highly publicized benching, for lack of a better term, right? It came at a big showcase event, the Rocky Mountain Rumble, and they put Easton Durham back at quarterback last year. But as you talked to Jack in the preseason, he actually was able to spin it into a positive, right?
Yeah, he was like, hey, I wasn't prepared enough. I wasn't, working as hard as I possibly could in practice. I now have to realize that there's always someone behind me. I could get benched at any time, and I really got to, start hitting on all cylinders much quicker. And I've been so impressed with, him. It seems like every week, if there's struggles, somehow he fixes them the next week. And sometimes that's as simple as just, hitting receivers on passes or making the right read at the line. And the next week it doesn't happen. sometimes other issues arise, but it rarely seems like he's continuing the same mistakes in week after week. And so that's been, super impressive. The one thing that I really like to see from him is he's a guy who can sometimes just rely on his legs because they're so good. And as you've seen the season go on, you've started to see him get more comfortable in the pocket. And right now, he's not looking to run first. The defense gives it to him and he's got to escape the pocket. He's going to take off and probably could get, 10, 15 yards. But when he goes through his reads, he's hoping to pass. And so that's been a really cool thing to see and kind of shows his maturity as a senior to understand that, hey, this offense is most lethal when it's kind of when he takes a pass first approach.
Yeah, his development has been really fun to watch this year. And I think it's a big reason why Highland is, there's a lot of reasons why Highland is 5-1, but I think his continued development will allow Highland to maybe advance even further than they did last year in the postseason when we get down to it. So Highland, you mentioned Thunder Ridge this week. That should be a win for Highland. Thunder Ridge is just a team that came in with a lot of preseason hype as maybe a sleeper or dark horse team, and it hasn't come together. So
no.
In fact, the third team, we knew Rigby and Highland were going to be good. The third team that's really stood out up in the High Country Conference has been Idaho Falls, right? And we saw the Tigers defeat Pocatello. That was a game on Idaho Sports last Friday, 32-20. I thought Pocatello actually played really well considering they were still without starting quarterback Ryan Payne.
Yeah, I was a little surprised by how close Pocatello was keeping it most of that game. I mean, that score is not indicative of how tight Pocatello kept that game. And, Dre Contreras was back this week under center for Pocatello. And, one of the interesting things is he played really, really well as a sophomore. And when you look at the Thunder going forward, you've got to be feeling pretty confident, hey, at least for the next 2 years, it seems like they've got their quarterback. I mean, this is a 5A team that he went against, completed 55% of his passes, 262 yards, 2 scoring touchdowns. And then you've got, the other sophomore who's throwing the ball to, Julian Bowie, who didn't even play until the Highland game. He catches 4 passes, 126 yards, and a touchdown. And when you talk about, one of the better deep threats in, District 5, Bowie's right there just for how tall and fast he is. And so that was really cool to see of, that big playability that Pocatello has. And, obviously late they, got into a 1-score game and could never get over that hump. But you've got to, and this is kind of the weird thing about these rankings that we do for, across the state is I don't know if you should necessarily fault a 4A team for losing to a 5A team. They're not supposed to win. So in 2 weeks, Pocatello has dropped from 1st to 6th in these rankings, but they've only lost to 2 5A teams that no one expected them to beat. So I've kept them in there. I was like, this is dumb, but it's one of those things where you look at Pocatello and people are like, oh, that 3-0 start didn't mean anything. I was like, well, sure it did. They beat all the teams that you would expect them to. They're not beating a 5A team. Probably not. I mean, that would be a huge upset. So it's just been a kind of a weird dynamic of how people, think about them.
Yeah, it's weird because I think the perception from teams from other areas, Boise area, Magic Valley, they kind of look at Pokey as the pesky little brother that's trying to tag along with the big boys. And they're so quick to dismiss Pocatello. Oh yeah, that 3-0 start was all smoke and mirrors. You guys aren't good. Yeah. It's I think Pocatello, not that they need any more motivation, but they can have a pretty big chip on their shoulder. They just seem to not get the same respect.
Yeah.
It's been a while since Pocatello was a real true powerhouse in football year in, year out, but you can tell they're building back to that level. Yeah. And I think Pocatello is going to surprise some people when it comes to the postseason this year, not because they're not the better team and they found a way to win, but because people aren't giving them the respect that they're due. And I think Pocatello is primed for a big breakout on the playoff stage this year.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of hurts them that they have to play this Highland game every year.
Yeah.
Because it's they're not, I mean, they don't have the numbers or the size. Like no 4A team is probably beating Highland. Like if we want to be, pretty frank about it, and probably the score is going to end up a lot of times like what it ended up against Century and Pocatello. So it's like, oh yeah, of course they're not going to win that game. Like don't count that against them though. Like that should not be, their litmus test.
Right. And when they are in a 3-team conference with Century and Preston, they have to find ways to fill their schedule. Ever since those guys got kicked out of the Great Basin Conference, it's been hard to fill the schedle. So
exactly. Yeah. And so, props to them for, actually willing to do that and not, trying to play 3A teams or whatever.
Yes, I have noticed that as a point of pride with not just Pocatello, but Century as well. We'll play up. We're not going to play down.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Well, speaking of Century, they had a tough one. They hosted Twin Falls.
Yeah.
Twin Falls is good. Just ask Pocatello. They were in a dogfight with the Bruins. 45-10 setback for Century. Now 1-4, but it's to the point now where you're trying to keep the positive momentum going so your players don't get discouraged, because it is a young team. It's a team where they're trying to fill in the secondary levels, like a JV program and things like that. So for Century, the wins and losses to me at this point they're important, but to me, more importantly are they improving each week?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this game too, I'm not 100% sure, but they were missing a lot of starters, including, Bruin Fleischman, who was just couldn't play. And so, that's huge. You're not going to, what are you going to do at that position or point? They're already low on numbers. And when you've got guys out with injuries, it's just not really a fair fight. But you got to, give credit to them. Okay, so they lose to this really good Twin Falls team. I don't even count that Highland game. That's stupid. The first game of the season in week 0, they almost beat Minico, who is now the number 1 team in the the classification.
Yep.
Yeah. So they almost beat them on the first game when their bus breaks down on the side of the road, an hour and a half before the game. Okay. That looks like a really good one. I'm trying to even think who else they beat or had close games with.
So they beat Bonneville. That was their win.
Yeah.
And then they've lost to Idaho Falls.
Great.
They're on the same schedule Pokey is.
Yeah.
Idaho Falls, Highland, Twin Falls.
I don't really see a bad loss in there.
No.
And so, when you look at this Century team, they got a first-year coach in Logan Horrocks. They can't be building for this year. No one really expected them to, just go gangbusters and blow through this schedule. Like that wasn't going to happen. What you've got to do is get all these sophomores and juniors and freshmen experience. And hopefully as Logan kind of settles in at Century, he builds a program. And that's the goal here. This is not like a 1-year turnaround. They lost so many pieces last year. This is like 2, 3, 4 years down the road that you look and be like, once these guys get on the field, then we can, start competing and doing this stuff. And so that's just a tough thing. And they're playing a really hard schedule. I don't really think their record's indicative of, their talent level.
Yeah, I totally agree. And they have a break this week. They have a bye week, so they have the week off. Preston, oh man, I'll tell you, Preston, 4-1. Jordan, they actually got into the coaches poll this week for
I put them in the media. I think one other person did.
I did not. I'll admit, I did not put Preston in there.
I thought their resume is good enough. 4-1. Their one loss is to an undefeated 4A team, and that was very close. It's not like they got blown out or anything.
Yeah.
And then you beat a Blackfoot team. Granted, it was very, very close. Blackfoot went for 2 late in the game and didn't get it, or actually right at the end. That's how Preston pulls it out. But hey, win's a win, and this is a Blackfoot team that just last week beat Skyline. That's a Skyline team that everyone thinks is at least decent. Maybe their record doesn't indicate that, but I give a ton of props to like Eric Thorson and everyone over at Preston for what they've done this season. You look at their schedule and it hasn't exactly been cakewalk, and they have just improved so much. What were they last year? 3-5 on the entire season. They've already got 4 wins. That's huge. You got guys like Brecker Knapp and everyone at that program, and Emery Thorson. They're just monsters, and they've just turned that offense and made it look so good.
I think at this point we have to start talking about Preston in the playoff picture because
100%.
4-1, and yes, 3 of those 4 wins have come by 1 point, right? They beat Lakeland 7-6, Star Valley, Wyoming 28-27, Blackfoot 27-26, and then they only beat Bonneville by a touchdown as well. But we're to the point now where this year in the 4A playoffs, District 5 gets 1.5 teams in. So last year they only got 1, and that was it, and that was really tough. But this year there will be a automatic berth given to either the second best team from District 5, which is Preston right now, or District 1 and 2 up north, which is Lakeland and or Moscow. And both those teams are struggling right now, and Preston has a head-to-head win over Lakeland. So,
wait, can you explain how this works? Like, I actually do not know. When you get a half team for football, is this going by their max preps score? How does that work?
Yes. So I believe they look at the max preps ratings for the second best team from District 5 and compare that to the second best team from District 1 and 2.
Gotcha.
So at this point, it's probably Lakeland up north. But like we said, Preston beat Lakeland already this year 7-6, which will give them a higher max preps rating than Lakeland. So I think Preston, and even if they don't get that spot, there are still 5 at-large bids that are handed out as well. And I think Preston has a really good chance to, or there's only 2, excuse me, there's 2 at-large bids, but I think Preston is in a good spot to grab one of those potentially as well. So I think they're, they have a tough stretch of games coming up. The nice thing that's going to help them is they're playing Sugar Salem this week, in a game that's on IdahoSports.com.
Yeah.
And that's Friday at 7:00. And then they also play Snake River and Pocatello. And those, we talked about this year with the max preps ratings. If you play good teams and they pile up wins, even if you lose, it's not going to hurt your max preps rating. So,
yeah, I don't exactly understand how the max preps rates like 3A games versus like 5A games or whatever. But, they should probably beat Sugar Salem, a 3A team. They should probably beat Snake River, a 3A team. I would think they're going to beat Century. And then you look at just like, okay, just take care of Pocatello. Well, then you win the conference, then you're in. Even if you lose, you probably got a good enough rating. You got 2 losses, maybe 3. Your rating's still going to be pretty good. And so, yeah, that's you would think they get in if they continue this trend.
Yeah, I could be speaking out of school here, but I think the way a couple of coaches that I talked to told me that the max preps rating doesn't really take into effect that you beat a 5A or you played a 5A and you're a 4A. All that matters is your opponent's winning percentage. So if you play a really good 3A team, like Sugar, then it's not like you get penalized for playing down a level. All they look at is, Sugar went 8-2. That goes into your formula. So there's been rumblings of it, and this will probably come up in basketball more than football, but of some coaches maybe trying to take advantage of that and play like maybe you're a 3A school and you play a really good 1A school that you're probably going to beat, but then that they're going to go 20-1 or whatever. So you can see some manipulation in basketball maybe with that. But
this is like, you saw colleges start to do this in the BCS era. When you get just the computers, ranking this stuff, like all that matters is you just go undefeated or you just have 1 loss. Like, does not matter who you play. Schedule a cupcake every week, and as long as you go undefeated, you're going to be in. Like, that was like the BCS. And now I'm interested. Like, there's definitely going to be some, coaches trying to figure out ways to, game the system, which, props to them. And so it'll be interesting the next couple of years. Like, hey, maybe, Pocatello and Century stop scheduling, as many 5A schools or things like that. And so, this, max preps thing is, as great as it could be for computers and trying to get everything right. Yeah, there's some flaws.
Right. So this is encouraging you to try and schedule good teams. So like, for example, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but like in basketball, for example, you could have up north Lakeland, a 4A school, schedule Lapway, a 1A school.
Who's going to be
which is going to just run roughshod over the rest of the 1As. Well, if Lapway goes 20-1 and their 1 loss was to Lakeland, Lakeland's getting credit for beating a 20-1 team. It doesn't matter that it was a 1A.
That's so dumb.
Yeah, there's definitely some flaws in the system.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to other sports. But for football, for the most part, it seems to be okay, I guess.
Okay.
So, yeah. But anyways, Preston at Sugar Salem Friday night on IdahoSports.com. That's going to be a really good matchup. And I should mention as well, Jordan, that Highland at Thunder Ridge game will also have on IdahoSports.com this Friday night. Audio only, no video, but at least we'll have an audio broadcast of that game. So that's going to be a lot of fun. Speaking of Sugar Salem, they had the week off. They're 2-2, but let's talk about Snake River. Second week or second time this year that Snake River has defeated a 3A playoff team from the previous year, right? They beat Kimberly in the season opener. This time they beat South Fremont, a team that got to the semis last year, 31-21. They looked pretty good. Yeah,
this South Fremont team was ranked. They've got one of the better quarterbacks in the classification in Cayman Peebles. And Snake River, I mean, props to them. They seem to be able to just do anything they wanted offensively. Quarterback Cole Gilbert throws for 230 yards, which, I mean, Snake River, there's games where they don't throw the ball like more than like 6 times. So to throw for 230 yards and a pair of touchdowns, pretty impressive. They converted two 2-point conversions. And then, Gilbert on defense picks off a pass, recovers a fumble. They've got this great tandem at running back in Carson Hawker and Zach Staley. And Staley was fantastic. He had, 15 carries, 100 yards, 2 touchdowns, and then, caught 75 yards through the air, had a score through that. And then they've got a receiver, senior Rylan Anderson, had 3 catches, 140 yards and a touchdown. I mean, so they're converting these big, long plays that are just killing other teams. And so that's the one thing against these. That's another team where they're playing up sometimes. They've got to go to Blackfoot. They keep that game close. Okay, 2A, they play down against the best team in 2A, who could probably beat like 95% of the 3A teams in Westside. So, like, you look at their 2 losses. Like, Snake River's what, 2-2, I think, yeah?
Yep, 2-2.
Yeah. Their 2 losses are to 2 teams that no one was expecting them to beat. And then their 2 wins are kind of against 2 teams that no one really expected them to beat, but 2 3A teams. And so you've got to look at that and be like, okay, in the grand scheme of things, like, is this a team that they beat Marsh Valley? Can, they have a nice little run in the playoffs? And I think you got to say, yeah, so far from their body of work.
Yeah, for sure. Snake River, I think for the first time all year, has a game that's maybe softer than any of the other ones they played. They're at Teton Friday night. So that should be a very winnable game for the Panthers. Yeah, Marsh Valley, they had the week off. Now they turn around and have to travel to South Fremont. Can they use anything that Snake River did and apply it to their game plan against the Cougars?
Well, I think Marsh Valley's got a better passing attack than Snake River did coming into the game. You got Hunter Roche at quarterback, and then, Peyton Howe at wide receiver, who just puts up, gaudy stats every once in a while. So, yeah, I would expect them to kind of use that deep passing game and see, not exactly an air raid. They're not going to do that. They've got, Michael Belknap running the ball. But, yeah, I would expect them to throw the ball as much as possible.
Yeah, and that'll be a fun one. As, again, Marsh Valley's gauntlet of a schedule continues. Let's talk about the third team in District 5. How about American Falls? 2 wins in a row over Parma, and now a 14-13 tight victory over Teton.
Yeah.
And now they play Wendell this week. I think American Falls has a good chance to win 3 in a row here and talk. We're talking about them being at 3-3. I mean, after that season opening game at Aberdeen, I thought, oh boy, this might be a long season for American Falls, but it seems like they've kind of gotten a little momentum going.
Which would be crazy too, because every team in that district last year won only 3 games. I think like every team went 3-6, which is kind of wild. That seems almost impossible. But yeah, you look at like these 3-team conferences, and I think that they get 1.5 in as well, if I'm not mistaken. So realistically, like, American Falls just has to beat one team. Like, you either beat Marsh Valley or you either beat, Snake River. Like, all of a sudden you're in the playoffs. It's crazy, like, how things can work out when you simplify it like that. And so they've just got to look and be like, all right, let's see if we can carry our momentum. And if we can just beat one of those teams, like, we're in. And then anything can happen. And I think that was their whole, plan going into the season. You talk to guys at American Falls before the year, and their whole thing was like, hey, we just got to beat, American or, Marsh Valley or Snake River. And like, that's our season. Like, we got to prepare for that. And so it's really cool to see them get some momentum. And when district play starts, that'll be, even more fun.
Yeah, those 3-team districts are really wild, right? Let's see. I had it on my phone what the breakdown is for the different districts, and District 5 gets 2 teams this year into the playoffs for 3A. So
they don't. Yeah, you just win one of those games and you're in. It's all.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good setup for sure. So, American Falls taking on Wendell this week, a 2A program that is still trying to find its footing. So, Speaking of 2A, West Side starts off Southeast Idaho Conference play with a 42-8 win over Bear Lake. They're 5-0, 1-0 in the league. How about Soda Springs taking on Malad? Malad with the 30-22 win, and Malad is 1-0 in the conference, but more importantly, Soda Springs is 0-2 now in league play. That was pretty surprising.
No, I was kind of surprised by that, but props to Lucas Thorne, his first year at Malad, and they just take out a Soda Springs team that last year, caused some chaos a little bit. They make the playoffs because basically everyone in that division made the playoffs. And then first round, they go and upset Aberdeen. So, Soda Springs is coming into 2021 with momentum. They've got, Tug Cap at quarterback, who is one of the better athletes in that district. And you're thinking to yourself, okay, all they got to do is beat Aberdeen again. And they're probably, got that playoff spot. They're probably the number 2 team in, 2A District 5. And then Malad comes out, surprises them. And Soda Springs has an uphill battle to now try and get back in the playoffs. And it's going to be tough.
It doesn't get any easier as they play West Side this week in Dayton, Thursday night football, Jordan. So
you're going to be there, right?
Yeah, we'll be there for IdahoSports.com. I'll be there broadcasting with Sean Kane. So again, that's a Thursday night kickoff, Soda Springs at West Side, 7 o'clock kickoff right here on IdahoSports.com. And if Soda starts 0-3, which I think probably happens, I think it's too big of a hole to climb out of. In terms of the playoffs. But
I just don't even think there's a route back. If you win the last game or whatever, it's
right. And now we have an important matchup this week, Jordan, on Friday night in Malad. Aberdeen at Malad. Winner of that game is kind of in the driver's seat for that number 2 slot potentially.
Yeah, I would have to think Aberdeen here is favorites. Just because their playmakers are pretty tough to go against with, Brody Beck and Cale Adamson and a couple other guys they got on defense. And so I would like to think that they're probably the favorites going into that game. But, who knows after you get a little momentum to a team, really anything can happen. And so, that'll be a fun one to watch. I would think that Aberdeen gets it, but man, who knows?
Yeah, for sure. And then finally, the 1A ranks. There was only one game last week. It was Rockland continuing to flex their muscles, 68-30 over Chalice. They're 3-1. They will play Grace this week in another non-conference matchup.
Hold on. Rockland, shout out that win. Just ridiculous. Sophomore wide receiver, Teague Matthews. Dude, 6'4". These stats, could be the craziest game I've seen, even for 8-man. He caught 14 passes for 303 yards and 7 touchdowns.
No way.
Receiver. Yeah.
Oh,
that's like the most gaudy stats I've ever seen for an 8-man wide receiver. Actually, maybe for a wide receiver in general. And he wasn't playing the stiffest competition, but still, that's kind of ridiculous.
There's been a couple guys who have scored 6 touchdowns this year. Nobody has scored 7.
Yeah. Well, most teams haven't scored 7. So yeah. And then you do it with one guy. Pretty crazy. So props to him.
Man, that's awesome. See, this is why we bring you on, Jordan. You've got those good nuggets. That's
exactly from the 8-man.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Could threaten that mark again this week. They're playing a Grace team that's really struggling. And then you also have North Gem back in action as they host Chalice. That should be a nice win for North Gem as well.
Yeah,
so.
And I think we're going to be at both those games. Just kind of do a 8-man feature this week, and so try and hit both the North Gem, Rockland, and Grace, and get out there and see those guys.
Yeah, that's going to be really fun. And yeah, you could definitely make that work because a North Gem game kicks off at 4.
And then you probably, I mean, they're going to run the ball. It'll take 2 hours. It's only like a 25-minute drive to Grace, and they got lights. Yeah. So,
I love it. That's a great game plan, Jordan. I'm very much looking forward to your assessments of those teams in person.
I'm excited.
Yeah, that's going to be a lot of fun. All right, well, we're kind of at the midway point of the season here, Jordan. We're going to actually turn into October this weekend, and we thought it would be kind of fun to maybe give out some mid-season awards for the high school football slate so far in District 5. So we're going to have an offensive MVP, a defensive MVP, special teams MVP, and coach of the year. Sound good?
Yeah, I love it. Let's do it.
All right, let's. I'll let you go first. You're the guest here. So offensive MVP, what do you got?
I think I got to go with Cage Brokens over at Westside. Their running back. I mean, it's tough to not put a Westside guy somewhere on here. But the thing about that team is like they're such, a team. It's like, you could put Parker Henderson or, Bryler Shurtleff or Cage Brokens, but, Brokens has just been so important for them. You look at that first game against Firth, who is, the number 2 team in that classification. He has a 33-yard touchdown real late in the game to, kind of give them a lead. Then Firth, returns a kickoff. And in overtime, then Brokens has to, score a touchdown to just barely, keep Westside's win streak alive. And against Snake River, he's got 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. Against a really good Coal Valley Christian team, carries the ball 13 times, 133 yards and 3 touchdowns. I mean, he's just such a monster. And I know that offense is so much about the scheme, and you could probably, mix and match guys, but his stats and what he's able to do for the Pirates is just fantastic. I think he's probably right now, the most valuable player to his team.
He gets downhill so fast that by the time he gets the handoff, it's like he's already past the defensive line. And like you noted, he's doing this on like 12 or 13 carries most nights. He's not getting a huge workload.
No, because they have so many other guys to give the ball to. And it just seems like every time he gets the ball, it's like, oh, big play. Oh, it's over. Like you're saying, like, you give Westside the ball first. It's like, they score, then they stop you, then they score, and the game's over with, 30 minutes to play.
Right. Yeah. So for my offensive MVP, I'm going to stay in the 2A ranks like you, and I'm going to go with Brody Beck, senior quarterback for Aberdeen, because his value, if anybody else is back there at quarterback for Aberdeen, I don't think it brings the same element to the offense because Beck is so good at running the football. And that season opening win over American Falls that we were both at, he ended up rushing for 190 yards and 3 touchdowns. And he's also able to beat you with his arm if needed also. So I think just in terms of, because we think Aberdeen is a team that's got big potential this year, and it doesn't happen without Brody Beck at quarterback. So
and I think it was 2 weeks ago against Soda Springs. I mean, he ran for like over 200 yards and 2 or 3 touchdowns. And so, I mean, he's doing it in district play too.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Defensive MVP. What do you got, Jordan?
I've got to go with Cody Colvin, the defensive end from Highland. I mean, that whole Highland front is just fantastic. I mean, they're putting up just gaudy stats all around the board, but Colvin is just kind of the leader right there with Sloan Lamson. His numbers are kind of ridiculous when you consider that he's going up against 4A and 5A opponents. He's got 43 tackles, 9 tackles for loss, and 6 sacks. When you're doing it against these types of teams, that just doesn't happen very often. He is so quick to the ball. Every time there's a snap, it seems like the quarterback has about a half second before he's running for his life because you got Lamson on one side or Drew Roberts on the other. And then you got Colvin, who just comes in like just a stallion running through the line and just getting to quarterbacks, getting to ball carriers. Even if some of these, stats don't show up, 1 tackle, I mean, he makes things so difficult and also sets up his teammates to, make plays too. One of probably the best defender I've seen all year. And the fact that he's able to do it at a 5A level is, makes it even better.
Yeah, absolutely. And that Highland defense is looking really, really good.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with my defensive MVP. I'm going to go with Ashton Madsen from Preston because Preston's off to this 4-1 start, and he is always in the middle of it. And not just like, he's not just the guy that's racking up 10 tackles a game, but he's making high impact games that in these one score games are basically determining the outcome. So he leads the team with 58 total tackles this year. He has 2 fumble recoveries, 1 forced fumble, and he's also got a blocked field goal. So he had a key fumble recovery in that 7-6 win over Lakeland, all the way back in week 0 in the season opener. In the Star Valley game that they won by a point, he blocked the what could have been, the potential game-winning field goal for Star Valley. He was the one who came through and blocked that kick. He recovered a fumble last week in that 1-point win over Blackfoot. So, I mean, he is just everywhere making high-impact defensive plays that are basically kind of sealing games up for Preston. And so Ashton Madsen from Preston is my defensive MVP.
That's a good call. What is it now? Special teams MVP?
Special teams.
Got to go Highland kicker Ian Hershey. This one's tough. I mean, you're just thinking about it. You're like, man, there's just not a ton of options. I can't really think of anyone who's like returned a kickoff. Actually, Crew Hales from Pocatello did return one. So honorable mention, Crew Hales, really dynamic in that Pocatello return game. But Hershey just is probably the best kicker in the state, and it's not even close. He's 23 of 25 on PATs. He's 9 of 10 on field goals, and he's just hitting 40-yarders. Every time Highland gets, within the 30, it's 3 points basically. I mean, he's got like a 43-yarder. I think he had a 42-yarder, and then a long of 49. I'm watching him on the sidelines against Madison. At halftime, he's hitting 60-yarders that are hitting the net, like legitimate. I mean, there's college kickers who don't have that range. And, I know he's got an offer from Idaho State. Army's looking at him. Weber State's looking at him. He's got some, interest. He's taken unofficials to Nevada, to Oregon State, and to Cal. And so, I mean, you look at his range and his consistency, he has become such a weapon for that Highland team, and really cool to see.
Yeah, and I'm gonna kind of cheat.
Ooh.
My special teams MVP is Ian Hershey, the punter.
Yes.
because we don't ever talk about his punting, but it is tremendous, right? You've seen it in person. It's incredible.
Yeah, I think he's averaging 43 yards a punt.
Yeah,
which is like top 5 in Highland history, which is kind of a crazy club to be in.
Yeah, so it's kind of far and away Ian Hershey, and then everybody else. Not that there's not other good special teams players, but it's just the gap.
His impact is crazy.
Yeah. All right, Coach of the Year, Jordan. Who do you like so far at the midway point?
I think I got to go Eric Thorson from Preston. I mean, you're talking about that Preston defense and the turnaround they've had, and it was maybe a bit unfair to them coming into this season. It was like everyone kind of already penciled in what they thought this how 4A Division 5 was going to play out. Everyone was like Pocatello 1, Preston 2, Century 3, and it was like no one really gave it much thought, or at least I didn't, and that was my fault because Eric has turned around Preston, who goes 3-5 last year, and you think, okay, maybe only going to regress. I mean, you lose probably the best player in Cole Harris. I mean, how are they going to do this? And all of a sudden they've started the season 4-1, and you can say, give them a negative. 3 of those wins have come by 1 point. Well, they're pulling out 1-point wins. That's not easy. And a lot of that is coaching, clock management, putting your guys in the best position to succeed. And then when those late game situations, are you prepared enough to execute when you really need to? And I think that's a lot on coaching. And that's why I think, Eric is probably midway through this season, my Coach of the Year.
For sure. And Coach of the Year, there's a couple of different ways you can go with it, right? You can go with the best coach on the best team. You can go with a coach that came in with low expectations, whether that's fair or not. The media and coaches do have. So I think that's where I'm going to go with mine. I'm going to go with the first-year coach at Malad, Lucas Thorne, because coming into the season, people it was pretty much just a foregone conclusion. Yeah, Malad's going to take last. Maybe they'll win a game or two. There was not a lot of optimism from the talking heads, right? People like us coming into the season for Malad. And here they are at the midway point, 2-3, with a really good chance to be 3-2. I mean, they played in their first game under Coach Thorne. They played the defending state champs from Wyoming, Lyman High School, and they only lost 22-14. So, I mean, they're a play or two away from being 3-2 instead of 2-3. They're 1-0 in the conference. And now, the tough part of their schedule is coming up with Aberdeen and Westside in the next 3 weeks. But I'm really impressed with Lucas Thorne. He came from out of state. He came from Oregon, and to come from there all the way to Malad down in the corner of the state, not knowing anything about it too much. He's done a tremendous job. So
yeah, no, I think probably the other one I can think of is Dave Spillott over at Pokey.
Yes,
I mean, you have a solid season last year, but then you switch quarterbacks, you switch nicknames and logos and all this stuff, and all of a sudden he comes out 3-0 and kind of has that team bought into what he's trying to do. And so, a lot of you're saying there's a lot of different ways to look at this, but I think those guys all have really kind of done more with less.
We're pretty lucky here. We've got good coaches and good players, so no doubt about it. All right, that'll do it for this edition of the Southeast Idaho Prepcast on IdahoSports.com, brought to you by Pure Adrenaline Motorsports. They're your source for pulse pounding adrenaline sports apparel and accessories that ensure you have what you need to unleash the beast. All right, enjoy the 8-man football this week. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun.
I've only been to one, and it was North Gem Rockland last year. And it was just the craziest thing I've ever seen. You got like cars pulled up like basically to the sideline. There's like a horse watching 20 steps away. I mean, I was just like, holy cow, this is like, they started early just because they could. Like, it was just like, this is incredible. It was just so nonchalant, and I loved it.
Yeah, so stay tuned for that on IdahoStateJournal.com for Jordan's recaps of those 8-man games Friday night. I will be in Westside Thursday night for Soda Springs against Westside, 7:00 kickoff on IdahoSports.com. Little Thursday night football. I went to Westside 2 weeks ago for the Coal Valley game, and on our way in, we saw a girl riding on horseback along the side of the highway.
Yeah, just natural.
Headed to the game. So,
are you going anywhere Friday?
No. So Friday, I'm just going to have a Friday off for a change. That'll be nice.
Slacker.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for tuning into the Southeast Idaho Prepcast. For Jordan Kaye, I'm Brandon Baney on IdahoSports.com.